This is Coach Aaron with an overview of the Cover 2 zone defensive scheme for 6-on-6 flag football. If you're not familiar with the terminology, don't be intimidated. Cover 2 just means there are two deep safeties, as opposed to Cover 1 that has a single safety, Cover 3 that has 3 safeties, or Cover 0 that has none. It literally just refers to the number of safeties. This is a Cover 2 zone. Zone defense refers to a scheme that means each defensive back is responsible for a specific area on the field, rather than being responsible for a specific person like they would be in a man-to-man scheme. This particular Cover 2 scheme utilizes 2 safeties, 3 cornerbacks, and a single rusher. All defensive backs will be playing coverage. The 3 cornerbacks will be responsible for a zone that's about a third of the field wide, with a depth of about 10 yards, ranging from the line of scrimmage to about 10 yards beyond the line of scrimmage. To make the scheme work, cornerbacks must maintain their zones. They should begin by lining up 5 yards beyond the line of scrimmage, about right in the center of their zone. They should line up in an athletic stance prepared to explode in any direction if necessary. Being in the center of the zone gives them an idea of exactly how big their zone is. Safeties are responsible for any player who runs deeper than the cornerback's zones. It's imperative that safeties play with extreme discipline and stay back in their zone during pass plays. It can be tempting to come up into the shallower sections of the field, but it can expose the defense to giving up big plays. Safeties put the proverbial lid on the defense and provide a safety net for the defenders underneath. Of course, by underneath, I mean any players in front of them on the field. While this bubble makes their zones look small, they are the last line of defense. So if a receiver tries to go past them down the field, the safeties need to push back and try to keep them in front. Likewise, if all routes run by eligible receivers, including the center and running back, are deep, then some of the cornerbacks may need to push back and provide assistance to the safeties playing deep. Just be sure that no eligible receivers are left uncovered underneath. Operating a zone defense can be tricky because it involves trusting your teammates. Once a receiver leaves your zone, you have to trust that your teammate is going to pick them up in coverage. But it's important to remember that football is a team sport, and being able to work effectively as a team is more important than any particular person's individual efforts. During the play, stay active in your zone. If there's nothing going on in your zone, don't just stand there upright. Maintain an athletic stance with your knees bent. Anticipate what could happen next. Here's what a simple example might look like. Take a look at the offense's X receiver. They're running a shallow crossing route that starts right in the outside cornerback's zone. As they break and cut across the field, the middle cornerback must be able to pick them up and allow the outside cornerback to stay in their own zone. It's important to pay attention to what's going on around you so you can anticipate these zone transitions. Sometimes you'll have multiple players in your zone, and that's okay. Try not to overcommit to one receiver and trust that your teammates have your back. Here's another example. Let's say the offense has 2 receivers bunched together on the left side of the field. They're both going to enter the outside cornerback's zone. The cornerback must maintain discipline and balance between the two. Defenders in adjacent zones have to make adjustments to anticipate the play as it unfolds. Instead of simply waiting, they can position themselves to smoothly transition coverage from the other defender. A common thing that happens in a lot of coverage schemes in flag football is leaving the lower middle of the field wide open. This is particularly common with the center or running back and can be exploited for big gains or easy first downs. Properly using this coverage means there will be a player maintaining this zone who should be on the lookout for the center or running back, and ideally be able to prevent easy plays up the middle for short yardage. With all this in mind, let's see a few real-life examples of this scheme in action at the 2023 NFL Pro Bowl flag football game. So the flag football they played at the NFL Pro Bowl is 7-on-7, but that doesn't matter. The principles are going to be the same. Let's take a look at these 3 defenders up front. They each have their own zone that they're taking care of, and they each begin covering one receiver, but then smoothly transition coverage when the receivers move through their respective zones. As an example, let's watch the middle defender. He starts covering the receiver just to the right of the center, but as that receiver moves through the end of his zone, he sees number 44 to the far left is coming the opposite direction through his zone. So he transitions coverage from this first receiver and then seamlessly takes on number 44. before breaking off and then covering another wide receiver who is coming back through his zone, letting number 44 transition to the cornerback to his opposite side. This is a perfect example of how a zone defense should work. He maintained his zone, stayed in an athletic position, and stayed aware by looking around and watching who was entering and exiting his zone. As he picked up new receivers coming into his zone, he trusted that his teammates were going to take on the responsibility of the previous receiver he was covering. Also notice that his teammates put themselves in position to take over the coverage smoothly and didn't just stand in the center of their zone waiting. They anticipated the play that was coming. Let's watch the play again in full speed to see if you can see all the zone transitions that were happening. Note that this play does end in a touchdown for the offense, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's a bad example of what happens in zone coverage. Just remember that these are all professional athletes on both sides of the ball. And to be honest, it looks like this was more of a result of a bad attempt at flag pulling. It looks like each of the defenders expected the other to pull the flag. If it wasn't for this mental error, this could have easily ended in just a short gain, but instead, it should serve as a reminder to never give up on a play, and always play until you hear the whistle. One key thing to note is that we don't just see the back of the defenders' heads. One of the benefits of running this scheme is that defenders get to see what's going on around the field, including in the offensive backfield. Ideally, we want to try to keep receivers in front of us. This provides us an advantage because as the play develops, we have more opportunity to see what the play is going to be. If the play turns into a run play, everyone should be able to respond quicker to the ball carrier. Of course, you won't be able to stare down the backfield the entire time. If the receiver is moving quickly, you'll need to pay attention. But the opportunity should be there to look at the bigger picture fairly often. This allows everyone to function as a team. Be cautious when playing the run or any pass behind the line of scrimmage, because as long as no one passes the line of scrimmage, the ball carrier can still throw the ball down the field. So the person responsible for that side of the field should contain that person until they go beyond the line of scrimmage. Once they have, every defender should be heading in that direction. There is a final special case I'd like to discuss: trips or overloaded bunch formations on one side. This is when the offense lines up all or most of their receivers to one side of the field. Even in these scenarios, it's important to maintain your zone. Often, these formations are designed to open up the opposite side of the field for sweeping run plays or quick throws intended to get yards after catch in the direction of the empty field. Defenders can prepare for these formations by lining up at the farmost edges of their zones to move closer to the receivers and watch the play develop, but still maintaining their zone. If, in the unlikely scenario that all the receivers run fly routes and there are no eligible rushers or receivers left underneath, the defenders can push backwards to assist in the deep coverage. Remember, stay disciplined, pay attention, and work as a team. Let's recap. To run an effective Cover 2 zone defense, defenders must maintain their zone on the field. Defenders must line up properly in an athletic stance ready to explode toward the ball. Safeties need to keep the lid on the defense and prevent big gains. It requires teammates to trust each other and work together as a team. Everyone must pay attention to what's going on around them, not just what's right in front of them. No one overcommits outside of their zone unless a forward pass is no longer possible and they are just reacting to the ball. That brings me to the next point. Once the play is clear, swarm the ball carrier. Possibly the single most important thing in flag football, and definitely the most important thing on defense, is pulling flags effectively. It doesn't matter how good your coverage is if the other team gouges you for big yards every time they get the ball. Watch the next video for a full overview of defensive tactics, including a breakdown of how to properly pull flags, properly defending a pass, and rushing the quarterback.